So I found it interesting that a company that we've had run-ins with, Bidvest, we've had run-ins from the very beginning of us being in Ireland, managing facilities. I remember one of the places in Tralee, there was a resident who was staying in, like a technology campus for students that were studying technology, but when it was off season, they would let out these apartments for rent, and we had been staying there fairly comfortably. The moment we noticed a bunch of Bidvest Noonan vans coming in to clean certain apartments in the facility, not long after that, the property manager, who was quite lovely at first and pretty straightforward, had suddenly become super suspicious, super shifty, and created this whole requirement for us now to basically have to leave the space. So this is the beginning of this form of kidnap where you're basically moving from place to place, and not having a place that's really home. Not have, and I mean the reason they do this, I suspect, is so that these findings, so that you never see what they're doing and you're never able to make the connections. And even if you get close to it, you focus on something else, you focus on immediate needs rather than focusing on the bigger picture. That's one of the tactics they use. They continue to use it today, through whatever means, even spiritistic, if not that being the primary way that they do it, because that's the only way they get their confidence. And then they also have the numbers, and they have the public recognition, and basically thinking to themselves and hoping that you realize or you believe that no one will ever believe you. And this is a rhetoric they keep drilling in, even through gang stalkers, um, just people whispering these rhetorics to you that seem random, but it's not random. It's there to really program the mind. Now, this consortium that was started by Mahalo, this Easy Equities consortium, was financed again by Old Mutual. And just so that you're aware, Old Mutual had separated itself into different entities in 2016. This is around about the time that we were running around in Cape Town, in various provinces, I think in Durban as well. And there's basically nowhere we could run in South Africa without having some sort of persecution, or feeling like our lives were in danger. And so, in any case, Old Mutual separated itself into Old Mutual Emerging Markets, into Nedbank, into Old Mutual Wealth in the UK, and then Old Mutual Asset Management, which is in Boston. And then I should also mention the fact that there's Old Mutual Holdings as well, which is also now a separate entity, it focuses mostly in Kenya and those neighboring countries. And then they have this alliance with UAP, Union des Assurances de Paris, which is basically, I guess, they do the insurances in France, and then they own AXA. Excuse me for the rubbish explanation, but I'm really not versed in all this stuff. I'm just really trying to make connections. I'm only an information designer. Anyways, so Old Mutual was the one responsible for this, for financing this Easy Equities thing. And a very interesting thing to note is that Easy Equities International Limited is based in Pembroke, in Dublin too. This is the same area where my sister worked in a place called Munchies, and she experienced a lot of bullying and workplace harassment, basically, um, in that environment. And I guess she will speak more to that. But very trying time last year. So that's just an interesting thing to note, because Old Mutual is no small company. Now, on the subject of Old Mutual, they're based in Cape Town. So of course we were never going to be actually safe in Cape Town, which is why eventually we had to flee the entire country. They also financed Steinhoff International. I'm sure you've heard of Steinhoff if you've been following a lot of the findings in South Africa that have been happening over the past couple of years pertaining to a lot of these firms and then the consulting houses that are involved basically in fraud. So anyway, the reason I mentioned Steinhoff International right now is because it's connected to Pepkor, a company called Pepkor, based in South Africa, but actually based in the UK. Now, a lot of companies in South Africa, especially these big conglomerates, are actually UK companies, but they do hold, I guess they separate them for legalities and other reasons. You can make of that what you will. So anyways, Pepkor owns Pepco and Poundland. Pepco owns Dealz. If you're Irish, you know these companies, and you've been seeing over the years that Pepco has been placed in very close proximity to Tesco, which I was busy asking the question in 2022 if there's been some sort of alliance or purchase of Pepco. And that's where it started, and then I started seeing Dealz being involved in that. I was wondering, is this all the same company? Because here's another thing that was happening concurrently. Before I even researched these companies, they remain top of mind, particularly because of the experiences that we have in them. And those experiences involve high surveillance in stores, theater. I don't know if you know the term of like public theater being kind of showcased to you in certain environments, maybe to throw us off or something, but a lot of it was heavy spying and just feeling constantly watched by security and managers, just by the way. Unfortunately, Dunn's was the same thing. This eventually became the case because we had stopped going to Tesco and then started going to Dunn stores. Same thing there. We walk into a Dunn store and then managers are constantly worried about what we're doing and surveilling us. And there's always this question of why are these guys who are usually sitting in offices out here trying to manage us as if we are their stock. So I thought that was interesting. I'm going to have to speak about this later because there's a lot to unpack here, but I do want to mention all these companies for my own peace of mind as well, and just to put all the Easter eggs out there, so to speak. Don't believe in Easter, but anyways, I digress. I will close off by just mentioning some of the companies that were based in South Africa and that had dealings with my family, as in insurance funds, things like that. The companies which are also now in Dublin. And Harcourt is one of those areas where they're based in. And this would explain so much of the South Africans we have had following us in recent years and been questioning why is there just more of a South African presence in Dublin. And so Investec is one of them. You'll remember Investec, I mentioned it when I was speaking about the illegal liquidation. If you haven't heard that video, please go listen to it. You'll understand why I'm speaking about all these companies. And then there's Sunlam Asset Management, which is domiciled in Dublin. And then there's Alliance, which I've just mentioned as well, also based in Harcourt. And then there's another branch. The first branch I knew about actually was in Blackrock, in the Dublin area. Or Blackrock, I guess it's a different county, I'm not sure. And when I tell you that area in Blackrock, we were staying in the car at the time, so because there's so many public spaces that we could be at, we often frequented this area. And when I tell you the kind of intense surveillance and persecution, and I'm talking about even tampering with cars, and harassment while we're in the car, and gang stalking, like it was just unprecedented at that point. I had a lot of nervous breakdowns, but came out strong somehow. But in any case, Alliance, also something to note. Next to the Alliance building, we realized that there were a lot of South Africans. You'd see children and adults going in and out of those buildings, mostly of African descent. And realizing over time that, wait a minute, I think this is a residential thing. Like there's residences here. And that's just one of the companies that we noticed this kind of pattern. But in any case, I don't want to take up too much time in explaining that, but I'll revisit it another time. I just want to mention it. And then we have Bidvest Noonan, of course, which is based in Swords. Bidvest, whose chairman is a South African man, who's not far off from the connections to this family. Noonan was basically a company, a facilities management company that was purely Irish, and they were bought out by Bidvest. So now it is called Bidvest Noonan. And then you have Old Mutual Dublin Funds, which is recorded to be in Walkey in Dublin 1. Then you have HSBC in Harcourt as well. I remember my mother mentioning that company as one of the places to try and follow the money. Easy Equities International, I mentioned, Pembroke, Dublin 2. And then Investec, Europe Online, in Harcourt. All of these companies are connected together in some form, whether it be through agreements, and I'm sure these consulting houses as well have something to do with finalizing those deals. And a lot more needs to be unpacked or rather spoken about, but I just thought I had to mention those. Do some digging as well on Old Mutual. I'm sure there's a lot of people aware of this. Old Mutual is headed by a man named Trevor Manuel, South African man, who all South Africans would probably know about because, you know, had a pinnacle role when it came to apartheid and things like that. He is currently part of the World Economic Forum. And I think you'll find with all these companies, there is somebody in there that is involved within those networks. And so that is what I will end this podcast off with. Let me know your thoughts on this. Let me know your hunches, whatever they may be. And then I'm going to drop off on that note. Thank you for listening.